I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who had a home in the mountains. At every opportunity, he would drive up there in his McLaren sports car. If you don't know what that is, Porsche drivers eat your heart out. The drive was very dangerous, full of blind curves, unguarded drops, and difficult turns. But he knew the road well. He was a good driver and confident in his car. One day, as he was driving up the mountain, he approached a blind curve. He slowed down, braked lightly, and changed gears in readiness for the bend. Suddenly, another car came around the curve, seemingly out of control, and swerving from one side to the other. The man thought he was going to be hit. He slowed down almost to a stop. The other car came roaring on towards him, swerving back and forth until at the very last moment it swerved back onto its own side of the road. And as the cars passed each other, a young woman stuck her head out of the car window and yelled as loud as she could, "Pig!" What? He thought. How dare she call me that? He was incensed by her aggressiveness and calling him names. After all, it was her fault. "Sow!" he yelled back at her. I was in my lane, he thought. How dare she call me that? As he regained control of his rage, he felt more gratified. At least she hadn't gotten away before he had yelled back his clever retort. And with that, he put his foot down, drove around the blind curve, and straight into the pig. Now, maybe you've heard that before and you saw it coming. But Advent is a season of miraculous expectation. And the thing about expectation is we see what we expect to see. We hear what we expect to hear. We achieve what we expect to achieve. Our expectations of God amount to our faith in God. So miraculous expectation, I think, involves, first of all, trusting even when I don't see it. The book of Hebrews in chapter 11, verse 1 says, "What is faith? It is the confident assurance that what we hope for is going to happen." Faith is the evidence of things we cannot yet see. Faith is visualizing the future in the present. Now, I spent a lot of time living in Missouri, the show me state. I'll believe it when I see it. But when it comes to God, and in fact, even many aspects of everyday life, that's backwards. That we have to, there are things that we have to believe before we see. An architect planning a building, or an artist carving a sculpture, an athlete wanting to break a record, or scientists trying to send people to Mars. All of them have to believe before they could see it. And sometimes you have to believe long, long before you see it. And indeed, in this life, you might never see it. One of the things that has always fascinated me about the ancient cathedrals in Europe is that they were designed, and people, carvers, sculptors, woodworkers, you name it, all of them would begin working on these magnificent buildings, and they died before it ever got close to completion. And sometimes, depending on the cathedral, generations of people died before they were finished. They died without seeing the finished product. I've always thought that the cathedrals are a great metaphor for how God uses the things that we do in this life in the name of Jesus and is going to weave that into the tapestry of a new cosmos. How he's going to do that, we can't know, but that he will do it is the promise of resurrection, by the way. So trusting when I don't see it. And miraculous expectation is following when I don't understand it. Again, from the book of Hebrews, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. Some of the greatest stories in the Bible involve people who followed God when they didn't fully understand what God was up to. Abraham, Moses, David, even the prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. And the thing is that every time God calls you to do something, it's a test. It's a test of who you're going to believe, God or your gut. And sometimes what God asks you to do might seem impossible. That's what it seemed like to Moses. God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh, and Moses is like, well, I'm not a speaker. My brother does that. God says, no, I'm telling you, go. And when that happens, we can become like little kids. Remember when you were a kid and you went through that period of time when you knew more than your parents? Oh my gosh, those old fogies, what do they know? A lot of times, God's commands don't make any sense. Like when someone hurts you, forgive them. That doesn't sound like the right thing to do when we're the ones who are hurt. Our natural response is to retaliate. But if you learn to follow when you don't understand it, that's when God can really bless your life. I think the commands of God, and I'm talking about the big ticket ones, okay? Like forgiveness, and there are others. Love your neighbor as yourself, and so on. Those big ticket items, think of those as marking out the realm, the area where the glory of God is being poured out. And when you're in obedience to those things, you're standing under that spout where the glory of God comes out. And when you disobey, you've stepped out of the boundary. It's still all there. God hasn't moved at all. But you've stepped out of that place where his blessing overflows. And finally, accepting that I might not get what I ask for. Sometimes we treat God like a vending machine, as if God's supposed to answer all prayers the way I want. Like the story of the little kid who wants a new bike for his birthday. Of course, I made that up because I love bikes. The number of bikes that cyclists should own is N plus 1. Just so you know, that's a standard, N plus 1. So this little kid wants a new bike for his birthday, and he's bugging his parents about it. Am I going to get the bike? Am I going to get the bike? And the parents are non-committal. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. But the kid was persistent. Finally, his mother said, why don't you pray and ask God? So the kid walked away and he went over to the living room. This is a high Anglo-Catholic family because in the living room was a small statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The kid picks up the statue, walks up to his bedroom and gets a shoebox. It's got all kinds of Matchbox cars in it. He dumps the Matchbox cars onto his bed, fills the box with tissue paper, places the statue of the Virgin Mary in the box, puts the lid on top of the box, and then tapes the box shut. And then he sits down with pen and paper to compose his prayer to God. Dear God, if you ever want to see your mother again, the thing about vending machines is they'll give you anything you want, but your choices are limited, right? You can only get what's right there. And I think the moral of the story of the pig and the sow, one of the morals of that story, is how we can get stuck and not be able to see the enormous possibilities that God has created in this wonderful place that we call the earth, the world, our lives. And maybe we should spend less time praying for the things that we want God to do for us, and spend more time praying for the things that God wants to do through us. Of being open to those things, to those possibilities, the myriad possibilities that a blessed life has. So think about, in the remaining weeks of Advent, think about which of these aspects do you need to work on. Trusting when you don't see it. Following when you don't understand it. Accepting when you don't get it. And, there are others we could add to that list, like giving when you don't have it. Persisting when you don't feel like it. And let's just wind this up. How does God build miraculous expectation in us? And I think two ways. One is through His Word, the Bible. Romans 10:17. Faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes through the Word of Christ. And secondly, God builds miraculous expectation in us through times of trouble and difficulty. God will use those difficulties to strengthen your faith. As we read in Malachi this morning, our troubles and difficulties, I think, are like a refiner's fire, purifying us. If we trust God, He will use those moments to refine us and purify us and build in us miraculous expectation. Amen.